Greetings from us here at Kritya-Poetry movement. Welcome to another chapter of this year's festival. We are happy to be joined by poets from diverse nationalities, linguistic spaces, and personal experiences. Let me introduce to you Bengt Berg from Sweden, Babita Justin from India, Julie Boden from the United Kingdom, Shaiju Alex from India, Namdev Koli from India. We have two more poets, one from Syria and another one from India, but they're finding it a little difficult to join. Shurouk Hammoud from Syria somehow has an internet problem in Syria, so she may not join personally, but we'll get to hear her poems. And Rajendra Prasad is finding it a little difficult. I think he's in some rural area from where the internet's not allowing him to join immediately, but we hope to have him with us soon. I invite the festival director, Rati Saxena ji, to meet the poets.
Namaskar. Welcome to Kritya International Poetry Festival. This is 15th chapter of Kritya. We have started Kritya Poetry Festival in 2005. This was the only nomadic poetry festival in which we were moving around the country because we have 28 languages and every state has different languages. So we were moving around with the poets of different languages. Then we were also following the poetry therapy. In place of sitting on the stage and talking to hi-fi poets or audience or people, we were going to villages, hospitals, prisons, and old age homes. So Kritya was actually, and not only that, we were going to villages also, small schools, colleges, and big colleges and university also. So in this case, Kritya was always taking poetry to the people. In this pandemic time, we came here with poetry therapy. We had 10 days poetry festival, which was actually recorded poetry festival. Then we have 3 days Central America Poetry Festival. And then we had 75 Kritya talk in which we were talking to poets, writers, journalists, musicians, dancers, singers, and even politicians and historians. This is after second pandemic, which had a very bad marks on our heart in India and in whole world. We thought of this is second poetry festival just for the peace and calmness. I thank you, all of you, to join us in this work. I welcome you in this poetry festival. See, remember, this is poetry festival. We don't take money from any corporates or any government body. From 2017 onward, it was totally self-dependent poetry festival, which is run with the help of poets only. Our team is poets only. And you all are our team. I welcome you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kamayani. Over to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you so much for leading us. So let's begin the evening with Mr. Bengt Berg. Bengt Berg is from Sweden. His debut poetry collection, Where the Dreams End, appeared in 1974, and since then he has written more than 40 books, mostly poetry. His poems have been translated into several languages, and he has participated in many international festivals. Berg has collaborations with other artists and poets around the world, and today he's here with us to read his poetry. Welcome, Mr. Berg.
Please unmute me. Many thanks. I'm happy to be with you, and I will read my poems in Swedish. Exil. I den främmande staden med det obegripliga språket vandrar du längs de obekanta gatorna. Inte ens flodens vatten som rinner under brons stenvalv vet du namnet på. Och åter står du där, alldeles ensam i din egen skugga som sakta sipprar ut över asfalten som en avlägsen melodi från ett ostämt instrument. Men så plötsligt får en liten fågel syn på dig, möter din blick med sina pepparkornsfärgade ögon innan den försvinner in i skymningen.
Wonderful. I'll read the translation. Exile. In the foreign city with an incomprehensible language, you're walking along unfamiliar streets. Not even the water of the river which flows under the stone arch of the bridge, you know not the name of, and there you are, standing, totally alone in your own shadow, which slowly trickles out onto the asphalt like a distant melody from a flute that is out of tune. But suddenly, a little bird notices you, meets your gaze with its pepper-colored eyes, before it disappears into the dawn. Think about love a moment. Know the road ends at the same place as it once began. Stand still, waiting for the rain. Look for a circle in the grass where we stood once. Up your hand over that spot as if for protection. Think about love. Know that rain will soon start to fall. Open your hand. Berg, next poem please.
Humanitet. Det kallas humanitet och det kan inte googlas. Humanitet är inte till salu och kan inte köpas online. Den ligger i din tomma hand om du öppnar den och ser.
This poem has been translated into Hindi by Rati Saxena and it is called इंसानियत. यह इंसानियत कहलाती है, लेकिन इसे गूगल में नहीं खोजा जा सकता है. इंसानियत बिक्री के लिए नहीं है, ऑनलाइन भी नहीं मिलती. यह आपके अपने हाथ में है, यदि इसे खोलकर परखा जा सके तो. Berg, next poem.
Om längtan. Han längtade tillbaka till utheten, sa barnet när jag öppnade fönstret för gråsparven. Var finns de utheter som får våra bröst att fyllas av längtan och de ord som gör språket till annat än ord?
This in English is on longing. He longed for freedom outside, the child said, when I opened the window for the bird. Where are the outsides which make our breasts fill up with longing, and the words which make language to something else besides words?
En dikt efter coronan. Vi är alla lika och unika. Vi skrattar och gråter på samma sätt. Vi längtar och är rädda i varsin del av världen. Fotbollen är lika rund i Afrika som den är i Sverige. Den indiska månen är lika vacker som den spanska. Vi har bara att dela den här jorden mellan oss. Din dag är min natt. När du går upp går jag till sängs. Men vi möts i drömmen.
I feel that there is a internet problem with her. I think because she uh, she's not there. So, Bank, you can read another poem if you have. And because I have to open your poem and read, do you want me to read in translation, or you can read the translation in English?
No, I don't have the translation. So please, if you can, Rati, if
Okay.
you can read it.
So which is the poem it is?
It is a poem after Corona. Poem
Okay.
after Corona.
Okay. Let me find out. Okay. So the thing is that because I have to seven day, you know. So yes, I'm going to read your poem now. It is a translation is there or not? I have to find out because Kamani is so unfortunate because she has always technical problem. This is the poetry. That's what I wanted to tell you, that we are poets. We don't have a very big we are not we don't have very big studio, or we don't have very big. So which poem that you are talking about, the a poem after Corona? Yes, I will read it. Okay. So this is Corona के बाद एक कविता. हम सब समान और अद्वितीय हैं. हमारी हंसी और रुदन एक जैसा है. हम दुनिया के हर हिस्से में जाना चाहते हैं, डरते भी हैं. फुटबॉल जितनी स्वीडन में गोल है, उतनी ही अफ्रीका में भी है. फुटबॉल अफ्रीका में उतना ही गोल है जितना स्वीडन में है. भारतीय चंद्रमा उतना ही सुंदर है जितना कि स्पेनिश का है. बस हमें धरती आपस में बांटनी है. तुम्हारा दिन मेरी रात. जब तुम सोकर उठते हो तो मैं सो जाता हूँ, लेकिन हम सपनों में मिलते हैं. कोरोना के बाद एक कविता, और इसको मैंने ही अनुवाद किया है. So thank you. So will you read another poem?
I have one left. I can read
Oh,
it.
okay, please.
På andra sidan, on the other side. På andra sidan regnet finns det andra röster som hade varit där innan det började regna. Det lät som om någonting som inte kunde glömmas bort. På andra sidan av freden fanns det andra röster som hade funnits där innan dödandet började. Det lät som någonting som påminde om liv. På andra sidan kriget måste det finnas en framtid som är möjlig för alla. Denna värld är en fin plats, värd att kämpa för. This world is a fine place, worth enough fighting for. Thank you.
So this is the poem. What you have read is the on the other side. Is it the poem? Okay,
Yes.
I will read it. On the other side. On the other side of the rain, there were other voices which had been there before it started to rain. They sounded like something they could not be forgotten. On the other side of the piece, there were other voices which had been there before the killing started. They sounded like something, and that remained of life. On the other side of the war, there must be a failure, which is possible for all. This word is fine place, worth enough fighting for. Thank you very much. Was wonderful poetry. Now she is here. You are all right.
Sorry, I lost electricity and the Wi-Fi. I'm
I
back.
could understand. I could understand.
Yes.
This accident happens with you only, Kamayani. There is something, you have some electricity in your body, I think, because whenever you come, there is always some accident. So, okay, over to you, Kamayani. Thank you very much. I will go to curtains. Thank you very much.
My friends call me accident queen, ma'am. I think I need to do justice to that.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
that is,
So we,
accidents are the part of poetry, and poetry comes out of accident. So,
yeah.
welcome to you. I am removing myself in the back.
All right, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So we now have Babita Justin. Babita Justin is an academic, a poet, and an artist. Her poems and short stories have been published in many national and international journals. Her works are Of Fireflies, Guns, and the Hills, I Cook My Own Feast, salt, pepper, and silver linings, celebrating our grandmothers, from cannons to trauma, and humor, texts, and contexts. Welcome, Babita.
Very good evening to all. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very happy to be here in the Kritya International Festival and be part of the sorority and Rati ma'am's great movement that poetry has become, especially during the pandemic times. My first poem is The High Priestess of Kamakya. It goes thus. She brings me spring water in a crystal jar, tender coconut smooshed with its mint blend ginger, dried ginger sprayed flesh. The taste of alluvial plains stings my tongue. Strawberry milk infused with lungs and akine float about. I put away the straw, spoon succulence, roll it under my tongue like the poetic fetish of a plainswoman. She lays out two tall episcopal glasses, completing the spectacle of spectre and succeto form. She is the altar girl, mopping porcelain pieces of her homeland's map from memory's tabernacle. A mother nursing a stillborn memory of home, suckling on her breast. A nun brushing piety onto the dustpan of silence and abstinence, mouthing the liturgy of disbelief, sweeping her heart across sprawling plains. She is faceless, nameless, steady without a shudder, supple without spillage, brittle and delicate with bamboo needle eyes. She watches herself in the mirror as these printed images jab at the crescent of her homeland, hidden like a poem under her severed tongue. The next poem I'm planning to read is Writing Women by the Waves. This poem actually came out of a project uh, which I was working on. I'm working on a project on the women in Muziris. Muziris was a 3,000 year old port which was rediscovered, re-excavated in Kerala around 10 years back. Work is still being done, and there's so much of splendor and so much of stories behind Muziris. I was doing a project on looking out for women in Muziris, and unfortunately, in the beginning, I couldn't find. But then, under the layers of man's history, I found out a lot of tales of women. This is it. Writing Women by the Waves. I heard women whispering by the waves, stories, sadness, and a mystery. I ran my fingers on the map of Muziris. I walked on the ground in search of black gold, dead women who murmured, tasting dust and mire, sun-beaten, on the land licked by floods and waves. Near the estuary, women laced River Periyar with yarns of tears, with age-lined faces, ancient as mummies. They owned no fields nor ponds. They dreamt of how they dove into the depths of the sea, surfacing with a basket full of mussels, which they sold for a trifle. They furrowed lands, reaped gold-eared stalks bobbing in the wind. They threshed, winnowed, husked grain till their backs ached and bones crumbled, all for a swish of cruel gruel of salt. Oracles smote their heads thrice with brass skymeters, chimed their bells and anklets. Some got married, some stayed goddesses' own. At night, the Devi kept them awake with a splaying ache. Every year they ran to the temple, draped in red, to strike and smite with the ravaging heads. They lived like bells inside the brass anklets, grain inside husk. The wind hugged land, sunning under its fury, logs of firewood that burned to a cinder. They waited near the temple steps like crocodiles turned to rock in the mud of history, hungering on the silt, waiting for a stray god to save them. Their untold stories, their untold stories, unheard songs, unloved bodies, unkissed lips. There were too many of them, footloose on the slippery moonlit lights, leading me into the darkness of an unbaptized land. I craned my head, a newborn listening to their secrets rattling in the void, feeling their fingers curling into mine. towing their dreams, wiped off by the memory of a wave, the giant curlicue of his own stories. Third poem I have, the third and the last poem is again my encounter with the last Jews who live in Kerala. They're the Malabari Jews, they're the last Jewish family in Kerala. So they came to Kerala 2000 years back. And in 1917, when Israel was born, a lot of them returned. Even in 16, they returned. That return is called Aliyah. So this particular family hung on because they think Kerala is a birthland. Of course, they go once in a while to Israel and get back. So this particular poem is called After Aliyah, a day with the last Jews of Kerala. We were 80,000 of us 2,000 years back. Now we are the last Jews of the land, 27 of us, shuttling honorously between Israel and Kerala. The Bashir lookalike Abraham Namia sits on his easy chair, not under the mangosteen, looking at the river that had drowned his house due to unforeseen rains. Namia narrates his story with a Semitic sarcasm. You did not hound us. He scratches his hirsute bosom. We lived here as traders, Motas, Kohens, Namias, always dreamt of a homeland. Some have made Aliyah. Aliyah rings in my ears as I bite into Kerala snacks. The Namia spread for me. Many who heard us tagged our story with many strands of greed. They have made Shylocks of us all. The homicidal Jew appears as a ghost on hillocks in movies drawn out of Western metaphors. I take a guilty bite into the spongy stale coconut cake. No writer got our tales right. Mrs. Namia walks in like a blotched up doll draped in an area. She smiles faintly as her husband spoke. He says, most thankful is Netanyahu. He came to welcome our Prime Minister, upsetting all protocols. Mrs. Namia rasped and spoke gently with her gaze fixed on the wall. Her irises were large. Her smile was a wilting rose. We Jews have had no certainties except for the warmth of the Lord's. This is my land too. I met my, sorry, This is my land too. I met my blood in Israel every year. Living in my birthland means more to me than dying in unknown lands. Mrs. Namia's lotus eyes droop down with a path of purple. She likes it there in Israel, he says. Her kin is there. Now she's ill. She'd rather be there. Mrs. Namia smiles mistily. Her disc-like eyes deceive memory and fate. She carries her homeland still in her mind. Holding it like a mirror, she peers into the silken weft and warp hemmed into the fabric of her past. Her siblings fill her heart with a longing so real. I wolf down sweets and biscuits, hungering for 12 festivals, and listening to how meat is cut the kosher way. I'd slit the bird's neck with 3 neat incisions, praying to Yahweh to make it suffer less. Namia's decision to stay on warms up a dark place in my heart. I want them to stay for an eternity without pain. As I rise to leave, Mrs. Namia shows me her citrus orchard in the yard. Namia walks us to the river barrier, whispering through thin ropes of sun. This is where the Jews belonged, any day.
Wonderful, Babita. Thank you so much. They were
Thank you so
unusual
much.
poems with very unusual themes. Thank you. Thank you indeed. Next in line, we have Julie Boden from the United Kingdom. Julie Boden has traveled internationally, writing poetry for page, stage, and film for over 25 years before becoming seriously ill 6 years ago. She's been nominated for BAFTA and RTS awards. She's appeared on BBC radio and TV arts programs and is a former Birmingham Poet Laureate 2002 to 2003 and poet in residence at Symphony Hall, Birmingham. Her poetry has been translated into a dozen or so languages, including British Sign Language. We're so happy to have you with us today, Julie. Please read your poems.
It's good to be here. Lovely to meet you all. Thank you for inviting me. I'm reading from my third collection, which is Through the Eye of a Crow, which was published in 2003, but the poems actually were written back in the 1990s. Okay, the first poem, they take different stages of a personal quest where I followed signs for a few years, and after the visitation of a crow. The first poem is called Crow Asks Why. Why do they try to write down words at all? Reaching down into their hearts to pull the very question of them out. Why do they try to write down words at all? Rubbing on the ringing of their glass, they hear a mantric om that sings them, rings them to a shattering of glass. Why do they try to make words sing at all? Why do they fight the winds that come to call, driving stakes into the ground? Their ropes are taught to hold them in the green tents of their lives. Why do they fight the winds that come to call? Why can't they let the wind within them out, canvas-skinned with flat lips that they purse to make a whistle sound? Why don't they bellow all the wind sound out? Bellowed by the yeasting of their words, they sense the foreign winds that move them, hear the vortex build, the tribal call. Why do they try to fight the wind at all? Why do they try to write down words at all? So that poem was at the beginning of this sort of long quest I went on, and halfway through the journey came Mantilla Lament. And is it true, Father? Is it true what you said, that the dead will walk out with their hands in the hands of the dead? And did you know that he would come? And did you know what he would say? And are you smiling? There was morphine in the glove seat of the long drive home, and now there are questions for the asking. It's a shame, you said, to be leaving. In your scattering of atoms, can you feel me? Do you believe in a life before death, or are we all forgotten? Grief is far too great a shape to bend to fortune, too large a scream for cliches or for cards. And the world is much too loud, and colours much too bright. Today, I walk on the unmown grass, and I remember you. Today, the cupboard door hangs down its wing, and it remembers you. And I wonder if thoughts are heard, or if words are all wasted to silence. In my nose, pear drops breathe. On my tongue, the small pink petal of a rose. And the making of books there is no end, and yes, too much study is a weariness of the flesh, and yet they write, and yet we write, and yet I write. Oh, for the being of it. Oh, for the believing without seeing of it, and oh, Abba, oh, Abba, oh, Abba, Abba, Abba. Oh, for the cradle song. Oh, for the mama, papa cradle of the night, for the carol after death that tells us that it knows now it was right. I will not fear the watch of ivory towers, the men whose words of references tie up their bows of endings. I will swirl my skirts to whirl in sparks of light. There are promises to keep before the night. My mantilla is black and gold. My mantilla is black and gold. My mantilla is black for the morning, gold for the shining. My mantilla is black and gold. In the night's thin veil is a world before words, before sentence formed, and world grew far too heavy. Sound swelled, consciousness whirled, and the moon was a laugh in an eye. Now an aeroplane charters an ancient path in the silk of a Samhain sky, and a priest in Beijing, in his temple of heaven, stands with his hands to the sky, offering a prayer for good harvest. And the wood of the circles that hold him knows no nails. Towards the end of the collection, the last poem is Snow's Hill, a Parting Too. Will it end now, Crow? Tell me, will it end? 7 countries in as many days. Your coming filled the silent bell of Ghent. Your feathers turned to whiteness there at Reims, before the great cathedral's coloured glass. There are no shell signs hidden on this path. No strident yellow arrows show your shadow slipping from me. Your yellow eye looks out from night's dark corners. I have held you through these last few hectic years, have hummed your way to sleep and watched your show of nightmares. Remember pandemonium, the silver net of dreams, you said. I have tried, but Crow, I grow so tired. They make new targets of their Babel towers and say they know their God. God help us all. No gentleman would usher in too soon another's death. What sacrifice is this that turns love cold? Is this it? Is this where we shall end? Is this where wonderings of days will cease? Those grey clouds mark the backcloth of a rookery. Nesting there, a murder of your friends, a great crow watch is listening. To my right, I hear the dovecote's whispered innocence. But Crow, my flesh is tired of all the signs. My eyes have read too many worthy books, decoded myths so often misconstrued, and now I see the zenith lies southeast, and so do you. There is no north to fear, no east or west. A conifer grows from the flower's heart, this flower of bishop's hat in Cotswold stone, or offering more symbols and more signs. St. Bernard loved the Virgin and the tree. His sermon on humility is written here in steps. And now I'm tired of books and chasing signs. You leave my head and fly back to your tree. Some other mind will share your visions, Crow, will bring you rest. As you fly off, I read your parting sign beside the clock, Ora Capitas, and I am free to be a Basho frog jumping in an agapeic pool.
Wonderful, Julie, wonderful. We love those poems and we loved your recitation of the poems. Thank you so much. Next in line, we have Shaiju Alex. And Shaiju is a famous poet, he's a teacher, he's a mimicry artist, and he's a motivation speaker and YouTuber. His work has been translated into English, Hindi, Tamil, and the Russian languages. He presents programs in various television channels, and he has more than 10 books to his credit. He's received several awards, needless to say. Shaiju?
Thank you. Kritya International Festivalil പങ്കെടുക്കാൻ മലയാളത്തെ പ്രതിനിധീകരിച്ച് പങ്കെടുക്കാൻ സാധിച്ചതിൽ വളരെയധികം സന്തോഷം. ഇതിലെ സംഘാടകർക്കും അണിയറ പ്രവർത്തകർക്കും ആദ്യമേ നന്ദി അറിയിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ലോകത്തിലെ നാടുകടത്തപ്പെട്ട മുഴുവൻ അഭയാർത്ഥികൾക്കും എൻ്റെ കവിതകൾ സമർപ്പിക്കുന്നു. മൈ ഫസ്റ്റ് പോയം പലായനം. അക്കേറിയത്തിലെ മത്സ്യക്കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങൾ പെറ്റു. പതിനാറിന്റെ അഴ ഭോഗിക്കാൻ കുഞ്ഞന്മാർ വരെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു എന്നതിനാലാണ്. അക്കേറിയ നടത്തിപ്പുകാരന് ലാഭക്കച്ചവടം. അയാൾ പെറ്റുവീണ കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങളെയെല്ലാം ചുമന്ന് വിപണിയിലേക്ക് തള്ളുന്നു. വിരിഞ്ഞ മുട്ടകളിലെ അടർത്തിയെടുത്ത ജീവഗണങ്ങൾക്ക് പോഷകാഹാരത്തിന്റെ വിഷാംശം നൽകുന്നു. വിരിയാത്ത മുട്ടകളെ നോക്കി പുലഭ്യം പറഞ്ഞ് തൊഴിക്കുന്നു. എന്തൊരത്ഭുതം! തോടുപൊട്ട തൃഷ്ണയിൽ മത്സ്യക്കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങൾ, പെറാത്ത മത്സ്യക്കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങളെ മേശപ്പുറത്ത് വിളമ്പുന്നു. കച്ചകെട്ടി തിരിച്ചവർ ചന്തയിലേക്ക് വേഗത്തിലോടുന്നു. മത്സ്യങ്ങളുടെ വായിൽ നിന്നും നുരയും പതയും. മത്സ്യങ്ങൾ ആവലാതിയോടെ ചെകിളപ്പൂവുകളാൽ കൈകൾ കൂപ്പുന്നു. പെറ്റുപോയ മത്സ്യക്കുരുന്നുകൾ അസ്ഥികൂടങ്ങളായി വെയിലത്ത്. കവിത.
Thank you, Shaiju. I'm going to read the English translation of this poem. The translation is by Ajayan Tenmala. In English, the poem is called Escape. Fries in the aquarium gave birth to new ones. Not that they had the fresh beauty of adolescence, but from the very day of attaining puberty, they were copulated by the large and small ones roaming to pray keeper of aquarium thrives. He moves all the newborns to market. He feeds them with nutrition of poison. He abuses the unhatched eggs. What a surprise! Crack of shell and wave of throbs. Tiny fish in ecstasy of embrace, unfertile ones served on the dining table. Those determined race to the market, surf and foam from mouth of fish. Groaning fish, seeking compassion, they fold hands with gills, the ones who bore children before time, wilt and dry under the sun as skeletons. Next one, please. Shaiju.
ഓക്കെ, താങ്ക് യു. അടുത്ത കവിത, നെക്സ്റ്റ് പോയം, ചുട്ട കരുവാട് ഉപ്പിന്റെ ഭൂമിശാസ്ത്രം. കടപ്പുറത്തെ ചാകര അവശേഷിപ്പിക്കുന്നത് ഉണങ്ങിയ മീനുകളുടെ ഘോഷയാത്രയാണ്. പിന്നെ ഉണക്കമീനാക്കാനുള്ള പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിൽ ഒറ്റയ്ക്കും കൂട്ടമായും. മണൽപ്പുറത്ത് വാചകങ്ങളുടെ തിരകളെണ്ണുന്ന പെൺകൂട്ടം. അപ്പോൾ മീനുകളുടെ ശവശരീരങ്ങളിൽ നിന്നും സ്വർഗസ്ഥനായ ഞങ്ങളുടെ പിതാവേ എന്ന സങ്കടഹർജി പൊന്തി വരും. അന്നന്ന് വേണ്ടുന്ന ആഹാരം ഞങ്ങൾക്കിന്നും തരയണമേ എന്ന പ്രതിധ്വനിയിൽ ആ വ്യർത്ഥ പ്രാർത്ഥന ആകാശത്തേക്ക് 3 തവണ വലം വച്ച് ശൂന്യമാകും. സമർപ്പിക്കുന്ന പ്രാർത്ഥനകളുടെ ശിഷ്ടഫലം ഈച്ചകളുടെ നാറിയ കാലുകളിലൂടെ മീനുണക്കുന്നവരെ ഓർമ്മപ്പെടുത്തും. വെയിലേറ്റ ദിവസങ്ങൾക്ക് ശേഷം വായിലേക്ക് ചുട്ട കരുവാടും കപ്പയും പദയാത്ര നടത്തും. മീനുണക്കി തകർന്നവരുടെ വീർപ്പുകളോ, കൊത്തിപ്പെറുക്കാൻ സമ്മതിക്കാത്ത ശ്രദ്ധയേറിയ ഉച്ചകളോ, നഷ്ടത്തിരമാലകളുടെ മഴയോ ബാക്കിയാക്കിയ പാടുമാത്രം ഉപ്പുരസത്തോടൊപ്പം അലിയാതെ നിൽക്കും. താങ്ക് യു.
Thank you. In English, that poem is called Geography of Salt. A procession of dry fish ashore is left by the season of plenty. Then women folk counting waves of speech come single and together to partake in chores to salt the fish. From corpses of fish, the prayer rises seeking mercy. O heaven O Father in the heaven, in the echo that give us our daily bread, the futile prayer circles thrice to sky and empties. Result of submitted prayers are reminded to those who dry fish through the odor of the filth-laden legs of houseflies. After days of sunbathing, fire burnt saltfish, and tapioca trudge into mouth, remaining scar made by sobs of those got exhausted by drying fish or the attentive noons. The rain of lost waves stays back undiluted with the taste of salt. Alex?
Okay, thank you. Next poem, അമ്മക്കണ്ണ്. കടപ്പുറത്ത് ടോർച്ച് വെളിച്ചത്തിലമ്മ കുട്ടിയെ തിരക്കുന്നു. കട്ടമരത്തിന്റെ തലയ്ക്കലും കൂടത്തിന്റെ ശരീരഭാഗങ്ങളിലും അന്വേഷണം തകൃതിയാക്കുന്നു. വാക്കാൽ തൊടുത്ത അമ്പ് നെഞ്ഞിലിരുന്നു വിങ്ങിയതിൽ മനം നൊന്ത് വീടു വിട്ടിറങ്ങിയ മകൻ. അമ്മ ഇര കൊരുത്ത് ചൂണ്ടയെറിഞ്ഞു. ആളുകളെല്ലാം കൂട്ടം കൂടി പരിഭവം പറയുന്നു. ചൂണ്ടയിൽ മീനൊന്നും കൊത്തിയില്ല. ഒടുക്കം ചൂണ്ടയിൽ കോർത്തത് അമ്മയുടെ ചൂഴ്ന്ന കണ്ണുകളെ. മകന്റെ ഉയിരില്ലാത്ത ഉടൽ കരപറ്റി മീൻ കൊത്തിയ കണ്ണിന്റെ സ്ഥാനത്ത് അമ്മ കണ്ണ് ചിരിക്കുന്നു. നന്ദി.
In English, this poem is called Eye of Mother. Mother searches for kid on shores by the torch, hurried search at the head of catamaran and body parts. Son who left home as the arrow of word struck and wounded heart. Mother gave bait and threw line. People crowd and complain. No fish touched the line. Finally, on hook, mother's plucked out eyes. Son's headless body washes up ashore, where the eye was devoured by fish. Mother's eye laughs. Thank you so much, Shaiju. With that, we move to the next poet. And now we have with us Namdev Koli. Namdev Koli is a Marathi poet who's a translator by profession. He edits a Marathi magazine called Vaghur. His poems have been translated into various Indian languages, and his collection of poems, Kritya-Poetry, has met immense appreciation. Namdev, you're welcome.
धन्यवाद. कृत्या आंतरराष्ट्रीय कविता महोत्सवात मला संधी दिल्याबद्दल आदरणीय रती सक्सेना मॅडम यांचे आभार. डॉक्टर पृथ्वीराज तौर यांचेही आभार. आणि या कविता ज्यांनी अनुवाद केल्या ते डॉक्टर जगदीश पाटील, प्रकाश भातंबरेकर सर यांचेही आभार मानतो सर्वप्रथम. आणि माझ्या काळोखाच्या कविता द पोएम्स ऑफ डार्कनेस या कविता संग्रहातल्या काही कविता वाचतो. पहिली कविता, तो शेतमजुराचा पोरगा आहे. जो नेहमीच प्रार्थनेला उशिरानं येतो, दीड पायावर उभा राहत म्हणतो प्रतिज्ञा कशी बशी. खर तर तो आवरून आलेला असतो घाईत गोठ्यातली कामं. जो आठवड्यातून 2-3दा दांड्या मारतो हमखास शाळेला, त्याचा गृहपाठही नसतो कधीच पुरा. खर तर त्याला जावं लागतं वावरात, घराला हातभार लागावा म्हणून. ज्याच्या सदऱ्यावर ओघळ असतील घामाचे, चड्डीला ठिगळं मागे विधभर, कुबट वासही येत असेल कपड्यांचा. खर तर त्याला शाळेतूनच जावं लागतं मालकाच्या खड्या गणवेशासकट. ज्याच्या भेगाडलेल्या पायात असेल टाचा घासलेली चप्पल अथवा बूट फाटलेला, काट्यांची कुरपही असतील बहुधा तडव्यात. खर तर अनवाणी पावलांनीच भटकत असतो तो शिवारभर. जो नदीत मासे पकडतो सहज, सरपण जमवतो भर उन्हात, मध काढतो मधमाशांना हुसकावून. खर तर तोंडपाठ आहे त्याला अख्खं जंगल, जीव जनावरांची बोलीही. तो जेमतेम पास होईल, तो जेमतेम पास होईल, अथवा तुम्ही नापासही करू शकता त्याला. तो जेमतेम पास होईल अथवा तुम्ही नापासही करू शकता त्याला. खर तर वर्गातल्या पोरांपेक्षा तो फार गुणी आहे. त्याला कुठल्या व्यवस्थेत बसवायचं सांगा मास्तर, तो शेतमजुराचा पोरगा आहे, तो शेतमजुराचा पोरगा आहे.
Thank you. Thank you, Namdev. In English, this poem is called He is the Son of a Farm Laborer, and this has been translated by Jagdish Patil. Who always arrives late for prayer, standing on 1.5 leg, recites the pledge somehow. Actually, He comes after doing all the chores in the cattle shed, whose absence in school is guaranteed twice or thrice a week. His homework is never done. Actually, he has to go to the fields and support his home, whose shirt is blotched with sweat, pants patched on the buttocks, clothes stink fetid. Actually, on the way to the farmyard, he has to attend school wearing the uniform, whose cracked feet are covered with torn shoes or sole-tattered chappals, with possibility of thorns piercing the sole. Actually, he wanders barefoot all over the countryside, who skillfully fishes in the river, collects firewood under the scorching sun, accumulates honey, driving away the honeybees. Actually, he can orally chant the dialect of the entire jungle and its creatures. He may pass the exam somehow, or you can fail him. Actually, he is cleverer than his classmates. Oh, master, in which system and in what category will you place him? He is the son of a farm laborer. Namdev?
पुढची कविता सलाईन. शेवटच्या काळात गुडघेदुखीनं हैराण होते बाबा. झाडपाल्याचा लेप, डीपीचं तेल, बाम मलम आजमावून झालेत, तरी करकरत राहिले त्यांचे सांधे. जेव्हा जेव्हा गावी जायचो ते अजिजीनं सांगायचे, सलाईन लावली की बिमारी जाते म्हणून. त्यांच्या समाधानासाठी घेऊन गेलो नशराबादला डॉक्टरकडे. अंगावरची सूज पाहून हरकत घेतली त्यांनी. दुखणं कमी होतील अशी जुजबी औषधं खरडून दिलीत कागदावर. थोडं बरं वाटू लागल्यावर मी निघून आलो शहरात. बाबा पुन्हा वेदनांच्या बाणावर झोपलेला भीष्म. जेव्हा जेव्हा फोनवरून बोलणं होई, बाबा इतकंच म्हणायचे, बेटा मला सलाईन लावून दे, मी ठीक होऊन जाईल. बेटा मला सलाईन लावून दे, मी ठीक होऊन जाईल.
Thank you. In English, this poem is called Saline. During his last days, Baba was restless with his knee pain. Tried everything: plaster of veggies, waste oil from DP, pain balm, ointment. Still, the knees kept brawling. When I went to the village, he compassionately urged, injecting a saline is the solution to sickness. I took him to the doctor at Nashirabad for his satisfaction. Noticing the swelling on his body, the doctor prescribed routine medicines to reduce pains. Once he felt some relief, I came back to the city. Again, my Baba, a Bhishma, lying on the arrow bed. Whenever I had a word with him on my cell phone, he would just say, Beta, please inject me with saline and I'll be fine. Please inject me with saline, I'll be fine. Namdev?
जी. पुढची कविता काळोखाच्या कविता. साधूचे कूड पुसू नये, नदीचे मूड पुसू नये. साधूचे कूड पुसू नये, नदीचे मूड पुसू नये, काळोखाचे गूढ पुसू नये. इतिहासात काळोखाचे संदर्भ आहेत. इतिहासात काळोखाचे संदर्भ आहेत. अर्थात काळोखालाही इतिहास आहे. काळोखात कड्यांची फुलं होतात, उजेडात फुलांची उधळण. काळोखात कड्यांची फुलं होतात, उजेडात फुलांची उधळण. काळोखात माणसं भूत होतात, उजेडात भूतांची धावपळ. काळोख तुझ्या आधी आणि नंतरचाही एक वफादार सोबती. कविता तेव्हाही होती, आजही आहे. कविता तेव्हाही होती, आजही आहे. रात्रीला घट्ट बिलगलेल्या काळोखासारखी, रात्रीला घट्ट बिलगलेल्या काळोखासारखी. रोज रोज रात्री मनाच्या भोवती रोज रोज राती मनाच्या भोवती जडतात व्याधी काळोखांच्या जडतात व्याधी काळोखांच्या. धन्यवाद.
Thank you. I'm going to read these translations in Hindi now. अंधेरे की कविताएं. जाति न पूछो साधु की, न सरिता का स्रोत, न अंधेरे की थाह भी. पाले में इतिहास के अंधेरे के संदर्भ और हैं, अलबत्ता अंधेरे का अपना ही इतिहास है. अंधेरी रात में कलियां खिली बन फूल, जो उजियारे सेंत में दिए जात उछाल. स्याही की ही गर्त में पिशाच हुआ इंसान, और उजियारी सौंध में घमासान अतिमान. अंधेरा तुम्हारे पहले और बाद में भी एक वफादार साथी. कविता कल भी थी, आज भी है, रात से कसकर लिपटे अंधेरे सी. रातें रोज बरोज की दिल को छनकाती, झपटती व्याधियां अंधियारे में. इनका अनुवाद है प्रकाश भातंब्रेकर का. Now, we need to read the translations of the poets who have not been able to join us. And there's a very beautiful poet from Syria who was unable to join because of the internet problem in Syria. But I'm going to read at least 2 poems by her in translation. We miss her original reading, but I think we'll have to do with the translation. This poem is called My Handbag. My handbag is full of caution, buttons of all sizes, for sudden holes, needle and black threads to sew wounds of heart and clothing as well. Empty sanitary bags for vomiting cases that occur to those who live here nowadays. Wet wipes to wipe makeup shredders. My handbag is full of futility. Polisher for my shoes, those exhausted by long roads. A mobile phone that is full of people's names I cannot any longer remember. My poor quality sunglasses, my optometrist prescribed on the pretext that I do not see beyond my nose. Dry cigarettes and a lighter that staggers genetically. Dried flowers and poems whose papers did not accommodate. Hankies that got tired of farewells. And you still ask me why my back hurts? Another poem in English. I'm not here. I'm not here. I'm not listening to you. Some clamor had forgotten to end the call in my head, opening my windows to the night's rusty tables, to knives still stuck in the necks of lovers, coffins the night composed on the tune of waiting, soldiers' shoes which lost their owners, bags the vacuum has burdened, seas which belch the prayers of the ones who died on their way to life, songs that mock the departed, a sky that tightens the dawn's ear, houses which changed their names, flags whose colors got throaty, and barricades whose stands ran away from the noise of their voices. To awakening speeches, however, no one left to read. So please do not scratch my silence. I'm not with you. Some tomb had forgotten the phone hanged on the inside of my head, then turned the curtain down. There's another poem in Hindi translation, which is by Rati Saxena. मृत्योपरांत आदमी के अवशेषों का साक्षात्कार. युद्ध ने हवा के साथ क्या किया? उसने इसे टूटे दिलों से सजाया, डिब्बा बंद नमक और धुएं के साथ. मरने से पहले किसका था इंतजार? मैं भोर की मुस्कान का इंतजार कर रहा था, जिसे मैंने अपनी प्रेमिका के रूप में कल्पित किया था। हवा क्या सपने देखती है जब तुमने बताया कि वह तुम्हें अपने साथ ले जाएगी। वह नाचने का सपना देखती है, और भी सपने होंगे जिनके बारे में कभी बताया नहीं। क्या तुम्हारे दिवा स्वप्नों में बारिश की जगह है? हाँ, और मेरे रात के सपनों में मुझसे मिली यह तभी मैं एक और अलगाव के साथ गर्भवती हुई। क्या आप युद्ध के बाद भी वैसे ही हैं जैसे कि युद्ध से पहले थे? युद्ध से कोई भी खाली हाथ नहीं लौटता है। These are poems from Shurouk Hammoud, and she's a Syrian writer. Unfortunately, she could not be with us. Another poet who was not able to join today is Rajendra Prasad. I don't know why he was not able to join, but I think internet issues are the reigning deity today. So I'm going to read for you Rajendra Prasad's poems, maybe two. All right, so he's a Kannada poet, and in English, this poem is called Heart. In Kannada, it's called Hridaya, and this has been translated by Kamal Bhatt. Heart. When everyone had cleared out, a surprise. Was my heart so big? There were doors earlier. Some people broke them as they went. Some others resorted to tunneling, and some made their way out through bullet holes. The rest, seeing the emptiness, migrated, and now there's no one left. Having seen through it all, I began to put aside the bricks one by one. Heart's chambers turned into an open ground. I toppled the mansion I had built. Look how vast my heart is. In this void, 840 million life forms. In this night, a galaxy of 1,000 million stars. The next poem in Kannada is called Prarthane, and in English, which has been translated by Ravi Chandra CP, it's called Prayer. I prayed for the rain of dreams, at least upon the inflamed nights. God, in his mercy, shot down a burning star instead. But how will he bear a star who cannot suffer the heat of the burning wick? Even like the moth that embraced the fire, desiring light, I transformed into a worm infesting the star without burning sleepless through the night. The third and last poem in English is called The Berlin Wall, and this has been translated by Pratibha Nandakumar. The souls of the demolished wall of Berlin are reborn before completing their terms at hell and are ambushing like the blood-sucking bats. In today's times of electronics, the walls have the chastity of transparency. The glass body, iron contours cast an invisible spell. Talks and will suffice to build. Don't know if they crossed the seas or took the flight. Or did they pass to Constantinople or merely took birth in the mind of the discourse loving leader? Right now, they are riding on the back of India, raising inch by inch, growing tall to Himalayan heights. At every town, locality, lanes, colonies, and houses, Berlin walls are rising. Also, the hysteria of the radio address. These were Rajendra Prasad's poems. We're sorry that we could not hear these poems from the poets, but with that, we come to the end of today's poetry session. I invite Rati Saxena ji to come and wind up the session.
What a wonderful session is this. Wonderful. Many languages, from Swedish to English, UK English, to Marathi, which is very prominent language in a very big area that is called Maharashtra. And the poetry of Maharashtra is very, very prominent. And Dalit poets, even the Bhakta poets, the saint poetry was fantastic. The Maharashtra is a land where the poetry always dominates. And Namdev Koli came from there with the poetry of darkness. Maharashtra always gave the poetry of light with the same poets, but they are talking they are moving with the time, and we all feel that the time is of darkness. Shaiju Alex is from the sea near the fisherman, the mother's eyes, for the fisherman's son. It's fantastic, fantastic. You can feel the rhythm of this language. I always fall in love with this Malayalam language when they read it in a ancient in their traditional style. And I'm thank you. നന്ദിയാണ് ഷൈജു നിങ്ങൾ മലയാളത്തിലാണ് ആ സ്റ്റൈലിലെ വായിച്ചു അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എല്ലാവരും ഒരു പുതിയ സ്റ്റൈലിലെ വായിക്കാനാണ് ഷൈജു യു റെഡ് ഇൻ എ your traditional style. I'm thankful for that. Otherwise, mostly you people also stop reciting in your traditional way. We should not forget our style also. That is the power of Malayalam poetry. But yes, of course, you write modern poetry also. Very strong poet. And then another poet from this Rajendra, whose poetry Kamayani has read in, he also belonged to a Kannada, very important South Indian language, which is very, very important in a modern time, and which is actually the voice of the voice which is anti-power, which is bringing from the going against the darkness, which is raising their voice. And that poetry, that voice comes in Rajendra's poetry. It is unfortunate we could not hear in his in his voice, in his language. Kannada is a beautiful language. India has many beautiful languages, and that is how this time we have three South Indian language. Babita also belonged to Kerala, but she writes in English, and her poetry I always appreciate because her poetry has some very personal touch. She she feels, she talks to poets, she talks to her the subjects of the poetry. Thank you again. And this Jews poetry I always loved. And now these two poets from our guest from international, Julie, your poetry brings tears in our eyes. Beautiful, beautiful, so nice. And Bengt Berg, you are our old friend, and you bring the light and laughter and a little bit joke, and then you make the poetry very light. And unfortunately, with your poetry, Kamaini lost her electricity, and I had to come in to talk to read your poetry. But it was fantastic session. Thank you very much, my friends. Thank you, all of you. It was a great session. I thank you, Kamaini. You keep calm yourself. You read so well, and you control everything so nicely. So what? You are accidents prone with that. I am also facing in all three sessions. You have some problem, but not because of you. It is because of some other reasons. So, but that is the beauty of your work. So, thank you very much, friends. Thank you, all the audience. Thanks a lot from India. Thanks a lot. See you somewhere in this world itself. Thank you.